Hi, everyone. Scott and Franz, we are back here with Chris O'Neill, the CEO of GrowthLoop. Hi, Chris. So excited you're joining us.
Hello, great to be here with you.
I know you took over as CEO of GrowthLoop earlier this year. For folks who aren't familiar with GrowthLoop, could you maybe start by just telling us a little bit about the company, but also would then love to hear about your background. I know you've just done fascinating work in this industry from a number of different angles.
Yeah, well, GrowthLoop is a data and AI company that basically helps marketers ingest data, organize and activate the data, and bring it into a full loop. So you can basically learn from the experiments you run by actually writing back to the data cloud the results, and then inform a full closed loop, so that you can do things faster and better and smarter. We like to talk about agility, intelligence, and impact. And that really are the things that guide Growth Loop. In terms of my background, I've been in this game for a while. I was really fortunate to be at Google for about 10 years, from 2005 to 2015. And I've done a variety of things since, but I've been brought back into this mostly because of this team and the promise of artificial intelligence. But during my time at Google, it was really the time when Martech was essentially born. It was really watching Google become, kind of an afterthought to being, of course, an important part of every marketer's or even company's arsenal, if you will. So it was really the beginning of using machine learning to moneyball a whole industry, so to speak. So we can unpack that throughout the course of time, but yeah, really nice run at Google and back into the marketing technology world, and happily so. I also serve on the board of Gap just for fun, given interest in a background in retail.
I would like to tap into what you just said about your time at Google, a long time, some 9 years, and then you mentioned the time frame where kind of Martech was born. We're now in a different time frame of innovation transformation with AI. And how similar or different is that? And what lessons have we learned that we should bring with us?
Yeah, the time at Google was really a story of movement of media from analog to digital. So in the early days of that, were really directors of e-commerce who were really thinking about online to online metrics. The story then became, how can it be about impacting across all channels, right? So if you think of retailers would care about the impact of digital things that they would do into their full channel view, or their stores as well. If I just generally think of the things that are similar, if you think about artificial intelligence, not a new concept. It's been around for a long, long time. In fact, it was coined at school I attended, Dartmouth College, in the 70s, for goodness sake. But there are three preconditions for any big leap in artificial intelligence, and that's the availability of near or real-time high quality data. That's number one. Number two are task-specific algorithms. And the number three might seem a little obscure, but I'll say it anyways, so I believe it is courage. It's a courage of some practitioners to say, there's a better way to do things, and we're going to try them, and we're going to apply them. So if you think about what Google was in that era, it was applying machine learning and artificial intelligence to advertising. Historically, it was become a gut thing, right? We're gonna do media mix by gut, and we're gonna do it because. And it was much simpler then as the channels proliferated and we had actual data to quantify the impact. It changed. So you basically had the availability of real-time data, both on the demand and the supply side for advertising. You had task-specific algorithms that would say, yeah, we're not just going to do this by gut. We're going to say, hey, we served some stimulus, some ads, and people either responded, clicked through, or took an action downstream, so you can measure it. So you get task-specific algorithms. And then you had a lot of courageous people, and these are the folks that I enjoyed working with back then. Those are the courageous, ambitious people who said, look, I am interested in doing things differently. I'm going to have the courage to stick my neck out and not just do what we did last year and say we're going to spend money across the media of newspaper and TV, etc. We're going to try this new thing called digital, and we're really going to lean into it. So those preconditions have existed, whether you're talking about Moneyball with baseball, you're talking about AlphaGo, you're talking about self-driving cars. It really comes down to the availability of data task-specific algorithms and courageous practitioners who are really pushing the edge of what's possible. But so that's really the backdrop and the similarities of what happened at Google back then. Now, what's different? What's changed? And why are we seeing so much excitement? And why am I in this chair and so excited about being here? Is there's really three driving forces that are shaping. The first really goes back to Redshift and the advent of Snowflake and the emergence of data gravity in the form of data clouds and all the benefits that that unlocks. That's huge. And that's been in the works for about 10 years, maybe a little under 10 years, but that's one. The second, of course, is really the notion of composability, the ability to have tools that can plug and play with one another with using modern application programming interfaces, APIs. So this concept of composability means you don't just have to have one system of record and one all-in stack. You can actually mix and match and have the best of both breeds. And I know you guys know all about this stuff. And then the third, and arguably the biggest, is the rise of lots of terms being thrown around: agentic AI, the ability to have autonomous or semi-autonomous agents that can do task-specific things. And the way I think of this is there's task-specific things like data ingestion or scoring of data, et cetera. And then there are outcome-specific agents that basically are doing things like audiences or journeys or name an outcome that you care to have. So if I summarize, there's some really key ingredients that are always present when we see a quantum leap in terms of artificial intelligence. That's data, algorithms, and courage. And we're starting to see some really, really seismic forces, these tidal waves of innovation that are really happening in the form of data clouds, composability, or the ability to mix and match, and then this agentic AI boom that we're just at the early stages of.
Wow, I love it. Well, all right. Well, speaking of courage, let's talk about a category of Martech, that's had an absolutely meteoric rise, over these past 5 to 8 years. But seems like it's actually going through some interesting shifts right now, given what's happening here with AI. So the composable CDP revolution, right? They've obviously had a role in helping marketers tap in to that more universal data layer that you were talking about. But now starting to feel like CDPs are moving beyond data management to play a more active role in that like cross-stack decisioning and optimization. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think a lot of change has happened, but then not much change at all has happened. And what I mean by that is you had the formation of SaaS and you had the formation of these standalone systems of record. And this was true across finance in the form of NetSuite. It was true across HR in the form of Workday, ExactTarget, and Salesforce. Like there have been these standalone monolithic things that served a purpose at one time. But as you've seen more channels, more cross-channel orchestration requirements, and to talk to different customer segments in different ways, meeting them where they are, there's a need to actually bring these things together, not just optimize within a particular silo. So there was a very specific need for a system of record that was called a customer data platform. That was very important at a point in time. That seems to be fading in favor of composability and the gravity of the data clouds, and the ability to do stuff really is what's most exciting to me. So it's not just that the data lives there. There are cost advantages, there are security advantages, and there's agility advantages to keeping it in fewer places, right? And that's why we're seeing the beginning and continued boom of the data clouds. But now we have the ability to use either machine learning or artificial intelligence at every step of the way. So I talked about it before, the ingestion, that these agents that will be really good at basically ingesting data and thinking of data schema and those sorts of things. We're already experimenting with that with success in our product. So that's one area where you're just going to get the data in the right place with fewer manual requirements. There'll be humans in the loop there, but that's one part of it. And then you're going to start to say, okay, great. How can we orchestrate in intelligent ways? How can we extract the right information, get suggestions for what you'd want to do with things, and then act upon them? So populating different canvases or surface areas is sometimes what we call it. And then figure out what the right permutations of those are the best, determine it upon the outcome that you care most about. Maybe you're trying to save a customer. You're trying to prevent churn. Maybe you're trying to acquire a whole new segment that might not be as present in your thing, or maybe you're having a slowdown in one category. I see a world where there's outcome orientation first, and then AI and agents in service of that objective, in partnership with humans who bring a certain level of ingenuity and creativity. So I believe these things come together to create audiences, to orchestrate across surfaces, and then importantly, understand what's working so it can, in proverbial Moneyball terms, do more of what works and do less of what doesn't, and then start it all over again with more suggestions to again, which audiences, which surfaces, and which results you're kind of aiming for. Last thing I'd add is like the wonderful part of this is explanation. So this is not black box, right? It can be, and I think some parties, some customers and companies in the ecosystem are pursuing a sort of a black box, just like this. We'll feed it in there and let it take care of it. I don't believe that. Maybe there's some day where that's true. I don't see that as the foreseeable future. I believe it's AI agents in service of ingenuity in the hands of actual marketers or business people in general.
It's definitely a compelling picture that you have painted there. So, I mean, GrowthLoop is pioneering a lot of this. I'm wondering, maybe to just get even more concrete about how this is working, can you explain to us about the loop, what that is here at GrowthLoop, how customers are using that?
Yeah, maybe we can overlay like a visual, but it does start with ground zero is, okay, if you're data cloud native, whether that's BigQuery or Snowflake or Databricks, we have this view that we're going to be native to those cloud environments. The artificial intelligence, as I said, is we call it the easy button, which is ingesting information into the cloud. So artificial intelligence and our product very specifically allows data to travel into your cloud in a somewhat organized fashion. It then helps organize, and very tactically, you'd say, create some interesting campaigns or audience ideas for me. So you could type very specifically, we are lagging in consumer electronics in the West today. Come up with some interesting audiences that might help me address this top level business objective. And out pops in mere seconds a whole bunch of audiences. And then you as a practitioner can say, let's act on this, this, and this. We're going to test this through 5% or 1% holdout to basically understand what the true incrementality is. You then set the campaign journey up to say, okay, we're gonna then send an email. We're gonna do in-app messaging. We're gonna do paid media, whatever it is. It can be very simple journeys, or it can be like some of our customers are using 30-step processes to optimize for promotion margins. You go and you launch those campaigns, and then you basically read back the information from the various platforms back into the data warehouse and say, okay, great. Here, and we have a dashboard, which is basically a lightweight business intelligence tool that says, okay, how in business terms, what happened? We said we're trying to change the consumer electronics sales in the West. We did this a set of actions. Did we actually move the needle on the outcome we really cared about? And then again, that gets fed back into the data warehouse, and that the practitioner can say, oh, great, do we want to just keep doing some of the things that work? Do we want to shift it? Do we want to adjust? There are explanations to say, okay, this is why we're suggesting these audiences and these suggestions. So that exists in our product today, and we're going to continue to optimize against each of those things. The audience creation is where we have the most. That's where we started. It's the beginning of the loop, and then thinking about how you orchestrate and optimize into the different downstream surfaces is something we're training right now by using all sorts of different LLMs. And so we're earlier in that journey, and have some brave customers, some courageous customers who are with us on that journey. But we're having fun with it, and it's definitely resonating with some of our customers for sure, and increasingly prospects in enterprise settings.
Let's talk a little bit more about AI. And particularly hot subject is now AI agents or agentic capabilities. From your perspective, what's real and what is hype?
Well, there's definitely no shortage of hype. Let's be clear about that. And I've been really fortunate. So it wasn't really the hype cycle back when I was at Google, but a lot of the underlying things are the same. Subsequently, I've had the good fortune to be at companies. There's one called Glean, which was essentially using agents for internal knowledge discovery, right? And now workflows, which is actually a really nice parallel to sort of how I've been thinking about this in the Martech community. That was started as a search concept where you basically can index and understand all the information that lives inside your company, so you could know what your company knows. I've seen that and helped name the company, launch that out of stealth, and had so much fun. And that team's just doing really great. I'm so proud of them. So that's one part. And then there's another company I'm involved with called Emma that's using personas and agentic stuff to really augment some workflows that are horizontal in nature, but given a persona or a specific vertical use case. And that's another one as well. But in this world, what I think you're going to start to see is at the highest level are tasks and outcomes, as I mentioned before. So there's a lot of tasks, and I think we'll probably start with tasks because that's where the semi-autonomous or the purely autonomous nature of agents can really have an outsized impact. There's a lot of grunt work or not sexy work that needs to happen just to make sure data is in the right place. And I also see a role for it to be governing data processes. So governing, like basically agents to make sure that agents are behaving and that the governance models are being enforced. So I think that's where I'm starting to see some interesting players start to think through more of the task-oriented side. And then on the outcome-oriented side, I see us basically right now, even as I described it to you, we started with audiences. So we're creating audiences, and that's in that world. And then we're talking about journeys, and we're talking about decisioning, we're talking about campaigns. Right now, those are really discrete, and they're siloed in many ways, right? They're siloed even with the tools that are used, and they're certainly siloed in terms of how the AI training is existing. I do see a world where, yes, we fill out agents within each of those different outcome orientations, but the real magic starts to say when you can optimize across all of those different outcomes with a higher order business outcome in mind, if that makes sense, right? Again, I talked about churn, or I talked about ideally customer lifetime value, or the way that Bezos wrote about Amazon in his letter. He said the job of a company is to maximize the intrinsic value of its company, which is really the discounted cash flows of a company. So if you want to roll all the way up to enterprise value, that's how I see the full game being played. But anyway, that's kind of a bit of a view of how I'm thinking about where AI is going to unfold specifically in this area. But I'm welcome to push on that a little bit and take the conversation where it needs to.
Yeah. Well, and AI is on top of so many other innovations that many marketers already have to deal with. So it's almost like a plane getting bigger and bigger, and you need to upgrade it while flying. Any tips and tricks there, or ideas or observations?
Yeah, it's interesting to your point. There's a lot of early movement around copy and creative, right? So if you think about where some of the personalized, the B2C use cases where it's basically how do I write briefs, or how do I do so? I use some version of ChatGPT or Claude, or Gemini, multiple times a day now. It's just like it's become part of it. And I think that's largely true. That use case has been well established, and how do you weave that into the mix? But my advice here is, it has to start with the data, right? Like the investments in the data, like the expression, which is, we've used for a long time, is starting to take hold, I think, more broadly. It's like, you don't have an AI strategy if you don't have a data strategy, right? You have to get the data in the right place. You have to have governance. You have to take care of it, because without that, the rest doesn't really matter. So I think that's where it starts. And that's my first bit of advice. I do think the outcome orientation is real, right? I think that's really what this should be about. Like you can't just be testing for wow factors. I think what the phase we're in right now. I'm Canadian, who is now also American, and I'm still learning all the different states and the cute taglines of them. But I understand Missouri is called the Show Me State, right? I still don't know why it's called the Show Me State, but I digress. But I think we're in the Show Me era of AI, right? It's like, you got me with the wow, it's fantastic, right? But how do you show me, the how and the now of the impact of AI, right? So that's the era that we're in right now. So I really do think people need to be clear about what they're trying to do, outcome oriented, right? What is specifically a business problem you're seeking to solve and the utility you're looking to get from these models or from these tools or companies, and really demand that. And then the other thing is, how can it scale, right? It's one thing to do a fun one-off demo, but if it doesn't scale to meet your compliance and your data and your governance things, then it just doesn't work. It's not worth it. So that's where I think we are right now. We're in that show me phase, and then the things that I think there's an appetite for is moving from the wow to the how and the now, and that's what we're having conversations with senior executives from board level all the way down to marketing practitioners around that theme as they think about how to choose partners.
I love that. Wow and how and now. Earlier you spoke about good data, tasks, and courage. I love that because you're combining technology on the one hand and human factor on the other hand. So what organizational changes are going to be required for businesses to harness all this new potential?
Yeah, I think a bunch, and it's interesting when we engage in conversations with senior executives. I'd say the wiser ones ask this question. The question you just so jointly asked is, how do I bring about change? And well, first, again, I'll come harp back to it, is like acknowledgement that the data assets themselves are incredibly valuable, and you have to invest in them and remove potential silos or barriers to silos that exist in companies, right? So the data has to flow, and there has to be clarity of ownership over that, even if it's not neatly living in one organization. There might be a data organization in some cases, but most times it's not. It's in a lot of different things. You have to assign clear accountability to say that's where this game begins and ends, really, is around the data. That's one thing. And then I encourage cross-functional behavior. So if you think of like Amazon with 2 pizza teams, part of the beauty of that, they'd bring a designer, an analyst, a product person, and an engineer in very small things in iterative cycles. So this concept of agile software development also applies, I think, to business. There have been different times in my career when I've used agile for everything down to like legal cues, for goodness sake. And it's not perfect, but it's surprisingly robust. And what I'm really getting after and hoping coach people is to take a outcome back orientation and then an agile software development mindset to unlocking those outcomes, knowing that you're not going to get it right the first time. So part of the thing that we talk about with the loop is we want people to get through their first loop as quickly as possible, even if the learnings of the lift isn't as dramatic as they might hope. But the expectation is that by going through and learning, it's going to compound. You're going to do more intelligent and more experiments, and you're going to get to learnings faster. And it's iterative in nature, right? It's the beauty of these tools is you can operate them very cost effectively, and you can do them you go through loops of from hypothesis all the way through to outcome very quickly. So those are the things that I think encourage people to think about. Invest in the data, figure out how to span different silos with different team constructs potentially that are really oriented around agility or an agile software mindset. My son just call it agile marketing. And then really like invest in more of the winners and discard the losers. And I guess last thing I'd say culturally is make it okay to fail, right? Like I'm not saying bet the farm and intentionally aspire to fail, but when you're doing this, the courage part is really a courage to create time and space to allow people to experiment so that they can actually find better ways. And often they're not eureka things. They're little compounding little things. That's the nature of this. So the mindset isn't like eureka, we're going to all of a sudden unearth some silver bullet that we've never known before. It's really a game of compounding small differences and small benefits. And that's I think that's true in life, by the way, but it's certainly true in marketing in my experience. It's about really those unsexy things that can be compounded and those little insights that get acted upon with more speed and more force. That's how I coach people and think about this with change management. But it requires a slightly different mindset.
I love the fact that you're really championing that agile mindset, and not just agile. And some people, when they hear agile, they just hear like, "Oh, work faster." No. Agile, actual agile software development process, and I think you're right. That can adapt to a lot of these scenarios.
Hey, yeah,
Boy, we
Scott, hey,
could,
Scott, can I riff on that for a sec? Because
yeah,
actually,
please.
I wasn't particularly good at physics. One thing in school, I did learn one thing though. Like people they use terms interchangeably, and one of them is agility. So I actually use the term velocity, and if I do
Mm,
remember my physics lesson correctly, velocity is a function of speed times direction. Right, so it really is about agility or speed times direction. So direction means you have to be clear as to what you're trying to accomplish, right? You have to lean the ladder up against the right wall so you don't just climb it and find that you're at the wrong wall. Like really being intentional about what you're trying to solve, and that's the direction piece. And then the agility piece is working back from outcomes, working back from what you're trying to do with your customers. This is, again, I give Amazon a lot of credit. They're really good at working backwards model and like a FAQ, PR FAQs, where you're thinking about the future. You're thinking about a desired state and you're working backwards from it. So it's not just speed for its own sake. It's velocity is basically function of time, speed and direction coming together. So I just want to riff on that a little bit with you, Scott, because I think, again, people do use the term speed and agility, and they use these interchangeably. And I think there's, I have a very specific thought in mind when we try to deploy them, certainly inside our company and with others.
I love it. I love it. Wow. Okay. I could, riff with you all day long. I know we're coming up on time. Do you want to wrap with, for the audience here, a bunch of marketers facing all this change, all this opportunity, all this challenge, for 2025? What would be like one parting advice you would want to give to them?
Yeah, I would say carve out room, budget, energy for experimentation. Think big, but start small. It doesn't need to be betting the farm. Those would be the things I would say. And that this concept of agile marketing is really, really real. And the goal is to start to get to think about marketing as an investment, not a cost center, that delivers very quantifiable and real ROI. So that's the one thing I would leave with the crew.
Sounds great. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to GrowthLoop for sponsoring here at Martech for 2025. And we wish you the absolute best in the adventure ahead for next year.
Thanks to you both. Thanks to your amazing communities. I'm really grateful to be a small part of it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.